Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Personal Cybersecurity Protecting Your Online Life. I'm Shilo Lockett, President of Comprehensive Wealth Management, and we've been talking about this subject for quite a while. Of course, we work on this internally all of the time, but have had a lot more discussion as we've seen cyber attacks increase in the past few years, in particular, with how do we help provide clients with information on just simple things they can do at home to protect themselves. So I'm really excited to have you join us for this event today, and hopefully we give you some great takeaways. Love to introduce our guest speaker today, Tim Villano.
Very much for joining us. And if for some reason I were to have a technical difficulty, George Harold of Artemis is also with us. And I think we all know the risks that we're facing regarding theft of our personal information, attempts to steal and defraud us of our funds and money. This is the world of online criminals and the Wild West of the internet, and the necessary evil of communications in our time. So I'll be discussing some of the online risks that we're all facing. There's not a great deal of complexity to the type of criminal activity we're talking about. The playbook of most fraudsters is simple and designed to be pushed out in volume, though you must always be aware of the potential of bad actors to target you or your family. So we will cover what the federal government is currently recommending to individuals and families. We'll also talk about various scenarios, both relevant to email and mobile devices, to keep your eyes open for. Shilo will also discuss the ways in which Comprehensive is protecting your information. And I just want to add, having worked with Comprehensive for a few years on testing of their networks and IT security issues, they're doing what most financial firms should be doing, informing and attempting to protect clients. So we can go to the next slide. We've reached a point where online fraud and theft are epidemic, and the federal government, along with offering recommendations to companies like Comprehensive, are also giving advice to individuals and families. You're looking at the Shields Up initiative from the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. The Shields Up initiative itself is sort of a red alert for companies. The initiative was put in place with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the potential for Russian bad actors, what we call state-sponsored hackers, to attack companies in the US. As you can see, they're also making basic recommendations for families, which consist of the items we should all be doing at this point. Such as, and I'm going to say this quite a bit today, but putting multi-factor authentication in place wherever you can, and on the applications that you use, your personal email, any social media sites, the Facebooks or X, Twitter, LinkedIn's of the world can all be protected with an additional factor or security control in addition to your username and password. MFA means setting up an additional code or security question or items to which only you have access. Updating our computers and mobile devices is important, as oftentimes the manufacturers, Microsoft and Apple, distribute important security patches within these updates. Make sure you're updating these devices, or ask for help if you don't know how. Think before you click. There's a great deal of email fraud and malware and bad stuff that comes with clicking links in the wrong email or text, and we will offer some examples. Finally, use strong passwords, which means avoid common dictionary words, your pet's name, street names. Use some additional characters and numbers or special characters as part of the passwords you create. You can also see here that CISA is recommending people consider using a password manager, which are applications that help you create and secure unique passwords. So I don't think we hear enough about this, but the federal government is really starting to directly address personal users and families. We can move forward. Okay, we have some
examples. Tim, before you jump forward, we had a question come through.
Sure.
In terms of firewalls, is it still true that Mac users are safer than PC users?
Well, I wouldn't say in terms of firewalls, but what I would say is in terms of the creation of malware, the majority of malware and malicious files are created to attack IBM and Microsoft computers. And that's really because that is where the majority of business users and corporate users live. So, but I will caution the person who's asking the question, more and more we are seeing malware created for Apple, and Apple is being specifically targeted. So if there is some relief, it's in the fact that most malware is being written for Microsoft as opposed to Apple, but that's changing. And I wouldn't say that necessarily that Apple systems are safer or inherently more secure.
Thank you.
So, sure, we have some examples of common scams we're seeing among personal users. And so never believe that Microsoft or Apple or another technology vendor is calling to give you tech support. Never provide any information, especially usernames and passwords. Never download software from someone calling you on the phone. If you see a pop-up window informing you that you have a virus, your computer is infected, call this number. Just close that window by clicking the X button in the upper left or right-hand corner. Beware of billing scams. We renewed your technology services or antivirus. Here is your bill or invoice. If you don't recognize this or are puzzled by this communication, just don't touch the message. Delete it. Don't believe emails or texts that represent someone has broken into your computer or we have video of your activities. This is just a fiction that bad actors are really good at creating. So we can go to the next slide. Billing and shipping scams are especially popular during holidays. We have a delivery for you. You need to click the link or correct something so that it will be delivered to you, so a package can be delivered to you. Scams that represent that we're sharing an important file with you, click here to access. The bottom line is, if you don't recognize the inquiry or service, you don't subscribe, you don't recognize the sender, just avoid or delete. We pass on an enormous amount of email just simply because we don't recognize it. If you have an account with a service like UPS or Uber or Amazon, you can always log into your account to verify whether or not someone is actually sending you a notification. But use extreme caution with emails and texts. Don't click links or attach files that you do not recognize. We can go forward.
Tim, we had a
Yes,
question come through. A
sure.
lot of browsers now use oppressive scripts to prevent clicking on the X or masquerade cancel close to go down the rabbit hole. Is hitting Alt F4 advisable to terminate the browser maybe instead of X?
That's absolutely fine. In case, and you are correct that sometimes that the manual methods of closing a window can be obscured. So Alt F4 or right-clicking an application that's in the dock and quitting it. And on Microsoft and Apple machines, there are ways to, I don't want to get into it, it's a little bit complicated, but there are ways to terminate an application or a process. And so if you can't click to close a specific window, oftentimes you can close the underlying application, and there are ways to close the process as well. But the main thing is don't interact with the information on that pop-up window. That's simply a malicious attempt or an attempt to fool you in some way or form.
And just to add to that as well with the secure file shares, we've seen a number of attempts where it's a fake DocuSign email. And to just reiterate what you were saying, if you're not expecting something, if you don't know you're expecting a DocuSign and you haven't confirmed the sender, don't click on the DocuSign link.
Exactly. And hackers are very smart these days, so they're going after services that we all commonly use, and so it's tempting. But again, you don't recognize the service, you don't recognize the sender, you don't want to be clicking links in there. So yes, we can move forward. So renewals of service, like I said, are very common. if you don't recognize the service, I mean, the most common scams really here are for antivirus. Your antivirus has expired. You better click this link or renew, or you're going to be exposed in some way or form. If you don't know whether or not you subscribe to that antivirus, it's best if you just leave that. You can always look at an email for the sender's domain or the return address to see if it looks legitimate to you. And most of the time we see that emails that are not from a legitimate source come from a Gmail address or a common email service. So if there's not a legitimate corporate domain attached to it, you don't want to interact with it. And don't bother calling the numbers. Most people are just looking for you to give up information. And we'll talk a little bit later about AI and artificial intelligence. And people may also be looking to record your voice and steal information from you in that manner. So if you're uncertain about what you're looking at, you can always get help. And we'll talk more about that also as we go forward. We can move forward. So, and here's a classic example of what I'm talking about. And most of these emails and these queries are directly from my personal account. And so here is here's a scam where there is a renewal of service. This email asked me to renew my McAfee antivirus service. This is very common. I wouldn't be surprised if many of you haven't seen this. Well, I know that I don't use McAfee. If you're unsure, don't interact with this email. Here, and just as I was saying before, notice that the email is sent from a Gmail address. This is the return address. Not likely that this is a formal communication from a corporate domain. So don't call this number, don't interact. I often find that I don't need to go beyond the subject line or even open these emails. I know some people may not feel comfortable with that, but there is a lot of exploitation, especially with respect to technology and security services. There's a big growth in this area. We can go to the next slide. Social media sites, again, these are examples of common scams or outreach directly to me, but we're all being targeted in this way. Now, I know we might not all have a LinkedIn account, but directly from my LinkedIn account, here's a woman named Irina who's reaching out to me. She wants to explore synergies and states that we're like-minded. And while this is an attractive offer, and sometimes I don't feel like I have many people with whom I'm like-minded, I don't know Irina. I don't know her company. And whether this communication is malicious or not, I have to assume, especially in the business that we're in, IT security, that this is a phishing expedition of some sort. I'm also willing to bet that Irina doesn't quite look like this. You can experience this kind of outreach on various social media services, and you simply need to pass on unknown outreach and attempts at contact. I think it's very important that children and teenagers also understand this as well. Take a pass on unknown contacts and outreach. And as a reminder, you can go to your security settings and most of these social media services and put multi-factor authentication in place. There's a great deal of breach on the Facebooks, Instagrams, and LinkedIns of the world.
And on that note, Tim, let's say you get a phone call from someone. We've got a comment here about someone getting a call representing a healthcare plan and just left a voicemail and number, no detailed message on what they needed, that kind of thing. They weren't expecting the call. What would you suggest in those circumstances?
I would pass. Very simply, I would not call that number back. And part of that is because there is so much malicious robocall process taking place. There's so much malicious outreach. Our mobile devices are flooded with that kind of that outreach, unless it is your health care plan and it's known to you and a piece of identifying information is offered, then I would not call back. In all likelihood, that's a service or someone fishing for information. So you have to approach all of these types of outreach with caution and regrettably with suspicion. So unless that were a service that I subscribe to, I would not be calling that number back.
We had another comment and question on how some of the large banks, Bank of America in this case, is not using multi-factor for personal banking. They're only using it on the business side. What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I would think that they are using some form of multi-factor. Multi-factor comes in lots of different forms. For example, there are very few large-scale financial services companies that are not using multi-factor for all services. It can be in the form of security questions or picture identification or confirmation that you are not a robot or some kind of automated process. But I would say that if you have a financial service that you feel like you need to protect and multi-factor is not offered to you, you should be on the phone with them and asking, how can we protect this? At this point, that would simply be out of step with the way things operate these days. And in our experience, services that aren't covered by multi-factor eventually will be breached. So if you are not seeing that it's offered, you should be inquiring for them. And we have some clients and companies who will steer away from services, applications, and software companies and software as a service companies simply because they do not have a multi-factor option. It's a significant protection. You want it in place. And the federal government agencies, the regulators, they're all aware that this is a vital, very important protection. We'll be talking about it with respect to your email and other services as well.
And on that same note, so if you're getting the text from your bank with the PIN number to use, the question, kind of follow-up question to that is, can bad actors intercept that text for a short period of time in order to use it to access your accounts?
Well, very good question. And I will tell you that multi-factor authentication, there are different levels of how secure multi-factor authentication can be. And sometimes you have options for how multi-factor will present itself. Using an app or a Google Authenticator or a Microsoft Authenticator, those are generally considered to be most secure. SMS text, yes, has been breached. And if your phone is stolen, there's also your SIM card can be loaded to another device and multi-factor authentication can be intercepted. So when we're talking with individuals or companies, we're usually trying to steer them toward the option of utilizing an app-based multi-factor authentication. But as long as you keep your phone secure in your possession, your phone is protected. It's certainly better to have SMS-based multi-factor authentication than nothing in place. So we'd opt to use SMS rather than nothing. There is breach that's taken place through SMS, and it's considered less secure than app-based, with the least secure being email-based multi-factor authentication. Because there's so much breach of email or business email compromise or personal email compromise, someone gains access to your account, they happen to have your username and password to a specific service, they can simply see that email as it rolls in. So hope I was clear on those different types of multi-factor authentication and what you want to consider there. Okay, so here's an example of a text outreach to me on my mobile phone offering me a gift. And, as the Aeneid states, beware of Greeks bearing gift. This could be a malicious or Trojan or malware waiting for you in the wooden horse here. I don't want any free gifts. Don't believe anything that's too good to be true. Beware of any and all links texted to you. So I can tell you almost just by, it is just basically my practice to never be interacting with links in text. Text comes to me from my trusted persons, from my business associates, from people I work with, and any kind of solicitation or communication in text, I'm very wary of, and might as well say right now, you have the right to refuse giving up your mobile device to services and companies as well. Unless you're using it for SMS multi-factor authentication, I don't want a bunch of corporate communication in my text. So beware of this type of communication, and you should always be hesitating when you have links within text. No one's going to, and anything for free, people can keep it as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so here's an example of a common sort of another scam, and the USPS, the U.S. Postal Service, has a delivery for you, but they need more addressing information. So of course you want to get your package. What I would say is your post office has your address. Any undeliverable packages should be there for your inquiry. Don't click this link. This is a phishing attempt via text message. It's likely malicious. There's a tracking number here. If you really want to, if you want to dive deeper, you can always put this phony tracking number into a USPS tracking portal, and it will show you nothing. It's just there to make this message look legitimate. And but I would say don't click this link, and be especially careful again with anything like this. So they're trying to offer that tracking number to make it look more legitimate. You can actually use it to disprove this if you want, but stay away from these kind of links within your mobile device. Okay, and these are my favorites. I received quite a few of these type of text messages from another mobile phone. Once again, an enticing offer here in especially during the pandemic, an old friend looking to get in touch with you, but not identifying themselves. Hey, it's been a long time. How are you? No identification. This type of message for someone simply means delete the message. And by the way, don't ever reach out in this manner without identifying yourself somehow or some way if you're texting someone else. So I receive one of these from a different number almost every week. And I would get angry about it, but I think it's fairly obvious. And again, generally speaking, what people are trying to get you to do is interact with them, exchange information. And, we always have to be thinking about protecting our information, but especially these days when AI is a bigger concern. And we also will talk about that going forward. Next slide. So IoT, or the Internet of Things, and we're all seeing lots of these devices popping up. I never thought I'd have a vacuum cleaner with an internet address, but I do. And light bulbs, refrigerators, other applications, thermostats, baby monitors, all connect to the internet. The biggest mistakes that people make with these devices are failing to change default usernames and passwords to these devices, and failing to put multi-factor authentication in place for the web accounts that accompany many or all of these devices. If you want a toothbrush that connects to the internet and don't know how to set it up properly, ask people for help, and your children, grandchildren, friends for setting up such devices. You can do it the old-fashioned way, and without these IoT devices, and I prefer not to use them because I think there's risk in them. I think the companies that make these devices do a very poor job of upgrading and patching these devices. All of them have to be updated just like your computer or your mobile phone. And if you're a Zoom or Teams video conference call user, or if your children are video game users, you can apply multi-factor authentication to these accounts and make them safer. So be careful with IoT. Unfortunately, if these devices are poorly constructed, or if you don't configure them properly, it's just an easy way to access your network. Next slide. So we saw quite a few examples of baby monitors and security cameras which were breached. Here's a couple that found a hacker speaking to them through their baby monitor. They simply did not change the default password or set up their web account properly, and a hacker was able to access this. The concept of the device might be very helpful. It's comforting to parents, but if you do not set up the account properly with the unique passwords and multi-factor authentication, you can be giving access to a bad actor to your device, and in effect, your to your home. So be very careful about these devices. Again, if you don't know how to set them up, get help. Biggest mistake, not changing the default passwords to these devices. So I mentioned that we discuss AI or artificial intelligence a little bit. If all the information we're discussing isn't horrible enough, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the NSA are all telling us that the incredible advances in artificial intelligence or computers and systems that can be trained to think like people are going to be exploited to attack us. The agencies are warning about what they call deep fake threats or synthetic voice, images, and video, which can impersonate people with ever increasing proficiency. So this is another reason to protect your privacy, protect your voice, protect images of yourself. Stay away from conversations with unknown persons. Don't call back the open inquiry from a health insurance company who may simply be looking to tape your voice unless you recognize them as trusted and they've identified themselves. So artificial intelligence is being used to create more convincing methods of fraud and stealing your identity. The whole family needs to be aware of this. And of course, we'll probably find that the younger generations are already way ahead of us on this. But you may have seen the news during the primaries, especially during the election year. Fake voice recordings of politicians and trusted parties are going to become more and more common. So keep your guard up. Don't give up your information. I can assure you that critical infrastructure providers, financial services firms, registered investment advisors like Comprehensive are all training and preparing for this, but you have to be thinking about it yourself. All the more reason to protect your personal information. Okay. So I've said it a couple times, if you're on shaky ground or if you have questions about an email, a text, or general computer use, get help. The Apple Store is really a great resource for Apple and iPhone users. There is a service called Geek Squad that you can contact who they provide pretty decent services for people and families. I always think the best resource is the IT person in your family. Again, kids, grandchildren, shockingly tech savvy. My teenage daughter at one point defeated all of my security measures and even plugged in her own network device in our house. There are some free antivirus services out there like Malwarebytes that you can download and use. Microsoft-based machines have good built-in antivirus features, and Apple really relies on the fact that you will update your system for patching. So those are important things to know. But if you do not have if you do not know what you're looking at or you're unsure of the behavior, anomalous behavior of your system, make sure you're asking and get help.
And what about filtering apps like Text Killer or Robo Killer, text filtering apps?
They're good. They can be good. We haven't really found the real answer there. It really depends on the degree that you're being attacked, I would say. When it becomes the case that your mobile device, you're being attacked on a daily basis, it's becoming unusual, you're being flooded with robocalls, you certainly can try such an application and see if it helps and see if it makes a difference. I can tell you when we reach that point with most people, and I know this sounds horrible, but the best solution oftentimes, if that number is being widely circulated to different sources and your personal life or business is being interrupted to that degree, we often are suggesting to people to change numbers. While that sounds really dramatic, sometimes that's the only way to address this, because we've had people that have used applications to filter text, to do things like that, and it really becomes a problem. I can tell you that personally, especially because we're an IT security company, I live with my phone in silence mode. I review my calls and texts after the fact. We are bombarded with enough fraud attempts that I filter that information in that manner and check my information simply because I will never pick up a phone a call or answer a text without verifying the source. And I think, regrettably, I think that's where we're all headed, Shilo.
And I think, you've said that the entire presentation, but just reiterating that, verify the source. Take a breath, don't instantly respond, especially around holidays and timeframes where these hackers, they know that we're busy and distracted and more likely to make a mistake. So just take a minute, don't respond at the time. You can go look up the company's actual 800 number. If it's your medical insurance, look at the 800 on the insurance card. Call them back directly instead of responding to the unknown person who's reached out to you on the telephone. One question that came through, and I know you're going to get to probably a little bit of this, but let's say something got through. You accidentally clicked the link. You've been compromised. Do you need to shut down your computer? What is the next step for you to take?
If you really think you've made a mistake and you've clicked open a link that you shouldn't, and you believe you've initiated a download of malware, I think the first thing to always do is to run a scan on your system with your antivirus. Very easy to do through Microsoft, simply going to the security center and initiating a full system scan. So the only type of downloaded malware that's not going to be picked up is what they call a 0-day, or something that hasn't been recognized, or there's not a digital signature for. So at that point, so run a scan, see if you can identify anything there. And then if you're uncertain about it, you need to bring it to a professional. You may need to have that system rebuilt. I hate to say it, but there's always a chance that the time bomb, the time release malware has been dropped onto a system, that you could have ransomware on your system. Now, if a ransomware screen appeared on your system and indicated that encryption was taking place and you're going to have to pay this ransom, the best thing you can do is shut down that machine completely, take it offline. It needs to be rebuilt. And if you're really sure that you've made a mistake, then you need to likely address it by rebuilding. If you've given up credentials for a specific service, Microsoft or Gmail or something like that, you need to immediately go into that service and create a new password for yourself and reset multi-factor authentication. So it really depends on the nature of what you think has taken place. If you feel like you've downloaded something on your system, you can run a scan. If you're an Apple user, you can run an update, which a scan will be run during that update. If you've given up a credential, go to that platform and change your password immediately. And the reason is, a lot of this is an automated process. There's not a bad guy sitting behind the screen watching everything you do. There is simply an automated program collecting information. And if you give up credentials, you still probably have time to go into your online service, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Yahoo, and change your password and security. So ransomware, take the system offline. It likely has to be rebuilt. Giving up credentials or something like that, you can change your password and reset multi-factor authentication. If you believe you have malware in your system, Apple, run updates. Microsoft, run a full system scan, see if you come up with anything.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so just a few final items to discuss here. Good password construction to us means 10 characters or more. Use numbers and special characters in your passwords. 8-character passwords are really a legacy approach. It's almost 20 years old, and it's not, and it's a 20-year-old Microsoft protocol, and it's not really sufficient anymore. So we say 10 characters or more. The more characters that you use, the more entropy you create. It's more difficult to crack a password. So 10 characters or more, use special characters or numbers. In any circumstance that I would say in any circumstances that you can go directly to a website to confirm a communication, do that rather than clicking a link. So you have a communication via text or email from Amazon saying, click this link, you have to renew your payment information. go to the website. In the notification section, you would see the same notification. So that's the best thing you can do in order not to interact with an email or a text. If a trusted person is asking you for something in an email or text, give them a call to confirm. If you have any suspicion about that, call that person to confirm rather than interacting with an email or links within an email or text. Especially, like I say, if you're suspicious at all about the communication, keep your guard up. Beware of freebies. That's really, that's really more dangerous. And so stay away from those kind of offers. Don't give up personal information, birthdays, social security numbers, your mobile device. Protect your mobile number. I can tell you, I have a maxim as a security professional that I live by and I use quite often when people are asking me questions or asking me for information or my mobile number. I usually say that's none of your business. Don't ask me again. I don't give up my information easily, and that's regrettably where we all have to go. So if there were one item that I think is an important takeaway today, an action item, put multi-factor authentication in place on your email account. If you do not have multi-factor authentication in place, eventually you will be breached. Like I've said before, we see this all the time with clients. So go to your account settings, your security section, and you'll find an option to set up multi-factor with your mobile device. You can use an app or you can use SMS. Like I said, app is preferable. And on that notion, I'll turn it over to Shilo to discuss a few of the features of comprehensive security program.
Yeah, and I just want to add on a few more things here to what you said too, Tim. The password managers that we use ourselves, both at home and at work, are really great for helping identify any compromised passwords, giving you advice to not use duplicate passwords. And I don't know about you, but the last 10 years have expanded significantly the number and complexity of passwords that we've had to have in our universe. You cannot memorize all of this, and it is not safe to have it in a paper booklet lying around your home. And it's almost impossible for you, if that gets taken, to remember all the things you need to update and change in a timely fashion. So these are really, really great tools that you can use and can help you develop some of these more secure passwords, which really are a whole bunch of gobbledygook of letters and characters and will ultimately end up having very little meaning to you, which makes them harder to hack. So I can't say enough great things about using those different tools. You talked about not clicking on links, and I just wanted to throw out a question there. There's these bad actors, but there's also a lot of good emails that we're getting from people and companies that we want to interact with. So if you're getting links from those trusted sources, what is your recommendation to tell? Is this a genuine email from my trusted source, or is this a bad actor trying to pretend to be that source?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is to always confirm the email of the sender and the return address if it's from a legitimate domain. So that's helpful for you to know. In the past, we've always recommended that you can hover over a link and see what the destination of that link is. Is it to a legitimate corporate domain, something that sounds correct to you, or are there errors and easily identifiable mistakes or swapping of numbers and letters within that address? So you can hover over a link and take a look and say, does this look legitimate? And I would say if you still have a question about the nature of the link, and you're dealing with a trusted institution like Comprehensive, you can make a phone call and say, just want to confirm that you guys sent out this link. And that's probably the safest approach with trusted parties. However, starting with attention to detail of the sender's address and being careful to make sure there's nothing funny about that construction. You can always look at the information, the identifying information from the person who's sending it. Does it look correct to you? Are there spelling errors or mistakes in there? Does anything look wrong with their logo? So there are a lot of things you can look at an email and say, does this really look legitimate before I dive in and click that link? But I also want to just add one thing, Shilo. You mentioned password managers, and there are a lot of great programs out. Yes, some have had security issues too, but Dashlane, LastPass, there are terrific programs out there that have Family options, for example, I've forced my entire family to use password managers. They don't like me very much, but they all use multi-factor authentication and password managers. And it's a good thing. It's very inexpensive. These are great ways to maintain your information. Like you said, we're flooded with different services and passwords. So one of the biggest causes of breach out there is password reuse, or using a password from multiple different services. One service is breached. An inventive hacker will try your username and password with other services. So you want to have unique and well-constructed passwords, and family options for password managers are quite reasonable.
And a follow-up question on that from one of our viewers here.
Mhm.
How is it that password managers are safe from being hacked?
Well, they're like all companies, IT companies and security companies, they're learning. And that's what we can ask for our companies. For example, Microsoft has been breached. Um, Serious IT security companies like SolarWinds have been breached. So there are very good minds out there attacking different common services. And for example, LastPass was breached and certain information was given up in the past year, but I don't throw away a service when they're breached. I want to see how the company reacts to it, if they're transparent, and what they do to remedy. So LastPass has put in place some great remedies, and I would argue today that they're stronger than they were in the past year or two, or stronger than during their development. So companies that have been breached are often forced to put in more secure protocols, but all of these password managers are working the same way. You have a super secure password, a 25-character password or passphrase that only you know, that you commit to memory. And you use that super secure password in conjunction with multi-factor authentication, a code in an app. And so your lines of defense are pretty strong. Strong, complex password or passphrase plus multi-factor authentication. And that's how that protection is achieved. And these are great services. And most of the IT security-based agencies have confirmed that the much greater risk is just that you have poor password practices. You're appending one character, or prepending or appending and changing one character. You're using the same password for all of your services. We've even seen this with IT people and financial services people. So that's what those password managers help you do, is create those unique and more secure passwords. So if people are trying to get at your information through cloud-based services, they can't do it. And if you have a password at a periodical or another service, and that service is breached and that password is given up, it's not reused across your services, especially more critical services like financial services, brokerage accounts, things like that.
Great. And you mentioned LastPass. What are a few other password managers you might throw out for those who are interested?
Sure. The ones we really have the most experience with are Dashlane and LastPass. And these have good group options. They also have corporate options. You can have a single person be the administrator to those programs. And there are different types of security settings you can put in place. Since the Department of Homeland Security is recommending that corporations and families and persons are using these, so we see them being used all the time. There's a learning curve and it takes time, but what I would say to you is, once you've worked with this for 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, you'll never go back.
Yep.
You won't want to be playing with notebooks and sticky notes and things like that. The other thing I can say is a lot of people utilize KeyPass and programs that are available through your mobile device and iPhone. There's nothing wrong with these, because there's what I call layered security. Your phone, your mobile device, always needs to have a secure PIN of 6 digits or greater. And that, by virtue of putting that PIN in place for iPhones, it encrypts the device. And then there'll be another level of security to access KeyPass or your underlying password manager. That can be your thumbprint, or it can be facial recognition, or things like that, which are obviously becoming more popular as a form of multi-factor or a third factor. And they're well, there can be issues there too, but they're becoming more reliable. Dashlane, LastPass, KeyPass, and other options through your
1Password.
mobile device. Yep.
Yeah, 1Password is one.
One pass is very good. 1Password is very good. So I would say, there's a constant battle here to make these programs more secure. But by and large, the encryption methods that are used are strong. And again, as long as your access to the program is locked down, lengthy, complex password, passphrase, and multi-factor authentication, it's a good way to go.
And what about authenticators that use dual factor and biometrics for that dual factor? Do you feel like that creates a single point of failure? Or is it still better?
I can tell you that they're pretty reliable, especially, the thing to know about that third factor, that's a thumbprint, that's facial recognition, that, retina scan, whatever it may be in the future, is there's always a token that sits behind that process. And so the companies that are offering that, like say Apple and iPhone, they have to make sure that those tokens that sit behind that form of multi-factor authentication are well secured. And generally speaking, they do a very good job of that. And I'll tell you, the ease of use, which encourages more people to utilize that kind of third factor, username, password, biometric, that is far and away outweighs the risk of breach. So certainly better to put biometric method in place than to not have multi-factor in place.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got a number of questions and I love all of them that have been coming in. If you've raised your hand, we aren't able to call on you since we have the screen, the cameras and mics shut off. So go ahead down to that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and enter your question there. We'd love to get to those in just a minute. Wanted to give you a quick update just on a few things that CWM does all of the time to try and keep our clients' data safe. We do regular training almost weekly, monthly, at least annually for a really robust training, but this is a live conversation in our office at all times. When we have clients who have a data breach at home, it is a subject matter that we reiterate and bring up. We do continual testing. We actually utilize programs to fake phish emails and scams and test our team members to make sure that they're staying vigilant. And it helps us catch those things ahead of time. And I'm really proud to say that we almost never have a click, sometimes from a new team member. And that's why we do it, is because we want to catch those things and have those conversations. The metaphor that I hear all the time is your home or your business is the castle. There's a moat around it. And we, the individuals on the other side, we are the ones that create the tunnel beneath by clicking on links or forgetting to have secure passwords or use dual factor. So those very basic things can provide tremendous protection for you at home and here in the office. We encrypt and protect information. We protect and encrypt our emails, and that secure client portal that we encourage a lot of clients to use to share documents with us, and that we'll use to share documents back to you. This is why we don't want to send your personal information over email that could somehow be intercepted and give some bad actors out there your social security numbers or other sensitive information. So that's why that portal is there. And while we'll continue to beat that drum of, if you have not set up your access to that portal yet, let's get you set up. It takes a few minutes and then you've got it, and you'll store that information in your new secure password manager. And then you'll be able to send us things in a really secure way and vice versa. I know this one can sometimes be tender for clients who are in a hurry, but we verbally authorize every money transaction. So just as Tim talked about, we go to the source. If we get an email from you requesting money, we don't just send the money, especially emails that we have seen, okay? This happens where the person claims to be on a trip in Europe and they want us to wire funds to a totally different account than we've ever had record of overseas. That's a great recipe for poof, the money is gone. It's very hard to retrieve it after the fact. So when our team members call you at your known phone number to say, did this come from you? Here's what we need signed. we want to make sure this is legitimate. This is why, because we want to make sure that your money stays your money. And I know sometimes that can slow things down just a little bit. We're pretty prompt about it, but that's why we want to do that. And then we will always call you if we have questions or something seems off. It's just a safeguard that we put in place. And if you have anything that comes through that seems uncomfortable or out of character, call us. If you get a DocuSign that doesn't look legitimate and you weren't expecting paperwork from us, you call us because it's probably not. Go ahead to the next one. Here's just a few next steps, and then we'll jump into that final Q&A. If you haven't done so already, contact us to get set up on your secure client portal. Set up a trusted contact through us for your CWM accounts. We do this through Schwab pretty regularly, and that gives us a second point of contact. If you're incapacitated, if for some reason you're not able to answer those questions, someone who is your trusted source to act in your stead, that's very important. Call us immediately if you've had a cybersecurity breach. It doesn't matter if it was with your Schwab accounts or with your email. It notifies our team and we lock down, we set an alert on your record, and we make sure that our team is extra vigilant and keeping an eye out for any malicious fake emails. We also have a protocol that we'll send you on some phone numbers to call and some actions to take to lock down your bank accounts. We'll notify Schwab, we'll notify other custodians. So we will be your partners in this to help protect your data. And that's just one of the many things that I think that we do here that goes above and beyond for our clients, because we want your money to be safe. And then of course, contact us if you have additional questions or you want to schedule an appointment. This is so great, Tim. Right here on our slide that I just had up, there is a QR code. This is a safe QR code, but we have a great question here about how secure are QR codes?
Well, I can tell you, generally speaking, they are not very safe. And you want to be very careful. Any QR code that comes to you via email or via text, you are best avoiding. And the reason is because this type of attack, this QR code attack, has become very common, especially to try and defeat multi-factor authentication. We've seen a lot of Microsoft-based attacks that say, scan this QR code to help us update your security settings and make your account more secure. Stay away from things like that. Now, in this case, for example, the QR code, you're talking directly to the source. You know this code is good. You know this is secure and safe here. But there's also a lot of fraud that relates to QR codes on parking meters, out in public spaces, things like that. So these are things that you want to be careful of. A QR code will oftentimes open a website or send you to another login, and sometimes that login is malicious or it's not real. So QR code scams are very common. They're out there and it's something to avoid. If you receive a QR code in email, you're best to stay away from it or contact the source and confirm that it's real.
And Tim, what antivirus softwares might you recommend? Are there system-specific ones for PC versus Apple? Are there any you would stay away from that you feel like are more vulnerable or do less good of a job?
Well, I think more and more Microsoft Defender and Microsoft's built-in antivirus is doing a good job. And definitions are updated very regularly and do a terrific job. If you're looking for something that's heavier duty and that can cover both Apple and can cover the Microsoft universe, Sophos is a program that is pretty good because it has behavioral recognition capability as well. In other words, not only does it look at a database of signatures for malware, but it also looks at the behavior on the system, certain types of behavior. So that is what I would call a heavier duty package that is available to personal users and also to Apple users, which is really a dilemma. There's not a lot of discussion, and I'm sure that many Apple users out there do not have antivirus in place. Sophos is a reasonable package for personal users. You know, we use a program called CrowdStrike, which is very advanced. There are lots of antivirus called Next Gen AV programs that also have this type of behavioral recognition capability and that are constantly being enhanced. And some of them even have 24/7 monitoring of the systems that they're loaded onto. So that's true for our client base and our client base that uses CrowdStrike. We monitor their systems, and CrowdStrike has a 24/7 SOC, Security Operations Center. So if you're really looking for something more advanced, you can talk about next gen AV for your personal use. Most people at the personal side, the highest level we see them going is to Sophos, and Sophos also has an advanced monitoring feature if you're interested. So there are different levels. Microsoft's pretty good. Apple does not come preloaded with any kind of antivirus. Sophos is a good option there. SentinelOne and CrowdStrike are good next-gen AV options if you're looking for something more advanced to protect your family.
How do you feel about McAfee?
I think McAfee is primarily still a signature-based software package. And so I think it is sort of a first level, definitely not a next generation program. As you can see, I've never liked, frankly, McAfee's marketing and updating model. So it bothers me, the communication that are constantly coming from them. I also think that it is kind of a system resource hog, or a system resource intensive on the system, especially during the scanning process. So I view McAfee as kind of a legacy signature based antivirus, and I think there are better options out there. And I think actually for your IBM Microsoft system, you're better with Microsoft Defender, which is pretty good these days.
Wonderful. We have a lot of great comments. I so appreciate the engagement. We have 2 more questions I'd love to hit. And if any others come through, please feel free to add them, and we'll do our best to get to those after the webinar. And I've had a request from a couple of folks if we can include a list of some of the recommendations. We will be sending out a recording after the webinar, and we will do our best to gather some of that information and include that in the email and provide that to everyone. So Tim, are you good hanging on for just a couple more minutes for these last 2 questions?
Absolutely, no hurry.
Thank you so much. One of them is voice impersonation. This just happened to a friend of hers. And the question is, how long do they need to hear your voice in order to capture it? Is it just hello, or is it a longer?
As AI capabilities improve, it's less. So, this is part of the improving AI capabilities, is that less of your voice is needed to provide a fuller picture. So this is why I'm very wary myself of voice communication and offering too much. Especially, it's one thing if it's in the course of business webinar, things like this, but general outreach, I stay away from it like you can't believe. I don't want to talk to anyone that I really don't know, that there's some chance they may be recording my voice. So in answer to your question, those capabilities are improving all the time, and less of your voice is needed to get a fuller picture or speculate and create a synthetic imprint of your voice. So doesn't take much. Be careful. The technology is improving, and all the more reason not to interact with people who are not known to you in any way or form. I hope that answers the question. May not be satisfactory, but we're going to be seeing lots of this in the news. We're going to be seeing more and more of these specific deep fake threats and specific descriptions of deep fake breach. Protect your voice. Urge your family to protect their voice.
Great. Thank you again, Tim, for holding this with us today and giving us a lot of great information. The goal is not to terrify everyone. The goal is to actually empower you with just simple changes that you can make today to protect your data. And as always, we're here at Comprehensive Wealth Management. If you need assistance, if you've got a breach, we want to make sure you're taken care of. Please go ahead and reach out if you need any assistance. And with that, we'll wrap for today. Thank you so much.